first, and then Don DeMille second, then Eric Wershering third. George, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Chair Moore. And with me on my left is Marcy Sangred, our Deputy Director of Planning for Delta. And behind me, Jeff Dave, I'm sure many of you know, our Director of Planning in Delta. And at the May 27th, 2013 regular meeting of Delta Council passed a motion and requested the Metro Vancouver Board consider an amendment to the regional growth strategy to include the property at 10770 72nd Avenue in the urban containment boundary at this point, and redesignate the same property from conservation and recreation to general urban. We've been following and working with your staff, and we're following the process as directed by your staff, and this is the reason we're here this morning in front of you. You can see on the slide here the subject property, and I was part of the negotiation team representing Delta with regards to when we purchased the lands for the bog. This is part of the original ownership of the private ownership of the lands, and these remaining properties were ones that we were not able to achieve purchase of. We actually ran out of funds, and the owners of the properties wanted both properties, where the subject property is shown and also the property on the west side of 91. They wanted those to remain, and they're currently zoned industrial. This is the properties, as far as I just mentioned, the Burns Bog Ecological Conservancy area, and definitely the properties that we'll be talking about today are very valuable insofar as the areas that we're recommending be transferred to Delta. The zoning for this property that we're in front of you today is I3 extraction zoning, and our council report that's available had a legal opinion that these rights remain with the property owner. I'm sure everybody can appreciate that. They can be developed today. They can be used for industrial extraction. And we have examples to show you insofar as the I3 zoning. They do not need a public hearing for this. They could go ahead tomorrow should the owners decide to do that. This is the proposal as it sits today. We're at a point in time where we can't proceed any further with the property owner. We have the community saying that we should be holding a public hearing in Delta first. We have people saying that we shouldn't be looking at an application until Metro determines as to whether they would adjust the urban containment boundary. So we're sort of stuck in the middle here, but again, we've talked to your staff, we've worked with them, and we're following the process as directed by your staff today. And that's why we're here in front of you. I can say that we've been working with the owners of the property on the development, as you can appreciate. And there has been talk with regards to the size of the proposed outlet mall, if I could use that term. And the owners have been listening. We've been working with them. And I can read you an email that I just received from the owner. We have had considerable comment from many sources in the community about the appropriateness of an outlet center at this location, and we have come to the conclusion that we will not pursue that option and will revise our concept to reduce the commercial component on this property. So those are things which we're working on at this time, and we didn't have that information, otherwise we would have had it in this PowerPoint presentation to you. So the outlet mall in the commercial area is going to be downsized. We've done a number of environmental assessments, both through the landowner. They have looked at this proposal. It's important to note that 45% of this site that you see before you will be used for green space, stormwater detention, and walkways. And again, the commercial component is going to be located at the northern section of this site. All the development will be towards the northern section. And we will be adjusting that with regards to what Delta Council would see as the extent of neighborhood commercial and mixed-use residential. We've been working on amenities, and this is one that we've been working on since we concluded the negotiations for the bog a number of years ago. And you can see that as part of the amenity package, we have the land proposed to be transferred to Delta for protection against development. Many individuals in the community, many people think that this land is already part of Burns Bog. And when you drive south on 91, it's on your right-hand side. It is contiguous with the bog. And so the proposal would require, if it's approved, that that land be transferred to Delta, and then Delta would put it into the Conservancy and would have joint ownership with Metro Vancouver as their other lands are. And this is the Burns Bog ecosystem that we used as a template for our negotiations. And this is a 2000 Burns Bog review, which stated the lands which are currently owned by MK Delta land. So this would be both lands, both sides of the 91, as we mentioned, have several attributes supporting but not required to preserve the viability of the bog. The report in 2000 also acknowledged that there remain notable gaps in the knowledge of this site. Dr. Richard Hebda, who's on the Burns Bog Conservation Scientific Panel for Metro Vancouver, was the author. And he recently provided an opinion to us based upon the knowledge that we've gained since ownership of the bog and working with Metro staff. And that's the majority of the parcel will have attributes required to preserve the viability of Burns Bog. And should the opportunity arise, this land should be acquired and be protected as part of the Burns Bog Conservation Area. So key improvements of knowledge since 2000 include a new map of water mount, which has been constructed based upon improved data for the eastern portion of the bog, a better understanding of the vital role of the transitional area at the edge of the bog, its lag zone, and its relatively poor condition in the bog, and of course the major fire of 205 acres burned in the southeast portion of the bog and destroyed a large part of the undisturbed bog vegetation. So what do we know now? We know that the parcel west of Highway 91, which we've asked as an amenity, being transferred over to Delta and eventually Metro Vancouver, is within the water mount of Burns Bog. This is new information. And the remnants of a natural lag zone are recognized as being vital to the bog, and this is the area that we're requesting be added to our lands. I-3 zoning in Delta, we already have an operation. It's called Pineland Peat, just off of Highway 99, and it's just south of the Vancouver landfill. And this is what I-3 does. It extracts peat, brings in fill, and we have extensive filling going on in this area. The advantages of this property from a financial point of view is it's one of the few approved areas that can take excavation material, especially from high-rise construction in the Metro Vancouver area. Most of the Canada Line excavation, a lot of that excavated material came to this property, and it is filling up. So from a financial point of view, these properties that are zoned I-3 are valuable and are financially advantageous to operate. But what are you left with? You're left with a scar, a brownfield, and in fact, this owner of this property already has an application into Delta for redevelopment of this site. So we will have redevelopment at some point in the future if these properties that we're talking about today remained I-3. Also, as part of the amenities that we've been able to negotiate with the landowner is transportation improvements. The federal government announced a few months ago with regards to a much needed improvement in an overpass at 72nd and Highway 91. It was originally scheduled as part of the Border Infrastructure Improvement Funds, but that, of course, they actually ran out of money, and we were left without any improvements at the 72nd intersection to 91. So they are willing to contribute $10 million towards the interchange at 72nd and Highway 90 and 91. It's a $30 million project with $10 million coming from the federal government, $10 million from the province, and $10 million from this private owner. We have done extensive traffic studies. There is a signalization at the intersection of 72nd and a roundabout access from 64th and Highway 91. So there's two planned exits from this property. Community benefits. Again, you'll have higher and better use of the property. That is what currently allowed under the I-3 extraction industrial zone. Again, this property that we're talking about today, both sides of the street, will be developed from its current natural state. We would be willing, our direction from council, as always, is to ensure if we get into a rezoning of the property, should Metro Vancouver decide to support Delta Council's request, we'll have a complete compact mixed-use community. More affordable and diverse housing opportunities that exist rather than exist in the area now. Again, it'll contribute to our economic growth, provide more employment and business opportunities in Delta, and of course will add to Delta's tax base, and hopefully also give us more reasons to ask TransLink, because we're always saying problems with ridership in Delta is they say it's low. We hopefully will have more of a population to support and sustain additional TransLink services. I would just like to make a point that if you take both properties together, this is in your briefing notes, taking both pieces of properties together on both sides of the street of Highway 91 that is owned by the owner, you're totaling about 282 acres. We're looking at developing 49 acres, or about 17% of the overall, and the remaining acres would be actually put into an ecological reserve, part of Burns Bog, and be protected from any future development. And when you look at other benchmarks in other regional areas and cities such as Seattle, they work on about a 4-to-1 ratio insofar as considering urban containment boundary changes. And this does even better than that 4-to-1 ratio.
So are you getting close to concluding?
We are. You are, Mr. Moore. We'll conclude right now. So, yeah, no, just go to the end. So the requested amendments that we're asking Metro Vancouver to consider include the subject property in the urban containment boundary, redesignate the subject property from conservation and recreation to general urban, and amend applicable maps to reflect the above changes. So again, we're here with regards to after working with your staff, and we have the application. We're following Metro Vancouver's process for amendments, and we're available for any questions. We hope Metro Vancouver directors will move it forward, so again, we can continue working with your staff and have further information back to Metro Vancouver. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And just to remind everyone, we're not really debating the merits today of this application. We're just going through a procedure process. So having said that, Director Reed, did you have a question? Your light's on. No? Okay. Excellent. You must have covered it well. Thank you. Did you do that to her? All right. Sorry, I've lost my page here. Don DeMille.
Hi, everyone. My name is Don DeMille. I'm not an environmentalist. I spent 16 years with Environment Canada and DFO. I wrote two little studies for the ecosystem review when it was done in Burns Bog. I'm presently working for Delta, restoring the bog and measuring water levels. I have here, I'm going to get this. I have just a few slides here that, I'm sorry, I don't know. Okay, so here we have it. This is the heart of the property. We're told that, that this is swamp forest, and I wanted to show you a bit of what swamp forest can look like. I talked about what happens with, I don't know why that's doing that. I guess I got to do this. I'm sorry.
Just press F5.
Click there.
F5.
F.
Choose your forward button there.
All right, forward button. Okay, sorry. I talked about that 99.9% of the people who see this area will see wildlife on the edges of the highway. These are recent pictures. This one's a recent picture that I took. This is a shot of one of many development proposals for this land that we managed to successfully overcome. We had a few disasters, little clear cuts, which happened ironically on the land that we now own. That's part of the Ecological Conservancy. Life grows back. There's a peat plant there, train leading to it. I wanted to show, this image shows the peat plant on the right, railways that run through to where there's peat extraction. Your staff tells you this was a peat extraction operation. On the far left, that's the furthest extent of peat extraction. The property consists of not the peat plant site, but where the double railway is, and that's all that was affected. You can see to the south of that where land's going to be developed. This is a 1954 photo, that it's natural, that it's pristine. It's not affected in any way. There's a salmon stream, Cougar Creek, on the south side of this that flowed through that property until Delta diverted it. So I argue that it's salmon habitat, and we really need to restore salmon streams, and we can. You're probably not even going to see it in here, but this is just proof from a local paper that the creek went that way and was diverted, because I had a difference of opinion with Delta about that. This is swamp forest. This is what would be developed. And some of this is on land that is saved, but this is the view of it. It's not just a mild thing. It's different than the main bog. The image on the right is swamp forest that already exists north of 72nd and is saved. So we do have this habitat in the rest of the bog. And it's just beautiful, beautiful stuff. It's loved by people. It's loved by people and their dogs. This is, you're not going to make this out probably, but this has been clawed by a bear. This property is frequented by bears. So there are environmental activists, naturalists in this area enjoying it, and we should be allowed to do so. In the property, there are groves of crabapple trees that are huge and special, fallen over in that. Deer eat the skunk cabbage, mushrooms, red-tailed hawk nests. And we had a disaster with the road being pushed through this beautiful area. But this area is not ruined. This area it's ruined temporarily, but we have this. This is owned by us next to the land that's going to be developed. This is just some damage the company did. Tootling around in there recently, I wish they hadn't, but it all grows back. These owls are great horned owls, not taken on the property, but the kind that I've seen and heard in the property, so they nest there. It's not simple. In this area here, I've just got some pictures of how the bog was presented. These are my photos, but these were the kinds of photos that were shown in 1988, promoting the development of all of Burns Bog. And that's it for my images. I'm probably, let me know if I'm out of time, but
You got about a minute to go.
Okay, this very property was a battlefield, the main physical battlefield to save the bog. So it has some history and specialness for me. I was there time and time again with the press. I went in with a friend and we stopped some of the chainsawing that went on. If this development goes ahead, the runoff water will be run along a ditch, probably north to the Fraser River. In those images that you were shown a little while ago, you saw a strip of land that's saved between the east side and the west side, and the purpose of that strip is to carry water from this high side on the east, which is a water mound, a second water mound, which pours mineral-rich water from 2 salmon streams and runoff and all that sort of stuff, right across into the main part of the bog that we've saved. If this ditch goes through, it diverts all of that water, so you're depriving not only the land opposite the development, but the land all along the whole length of the bog from this upland water that it's always had going into it.
So now you should be concluding.
Now I should be concluding. Okay, so what I've urged you to do is, it's a tempting deal because we get a little bit, but when the bog was going to be purchased, a judge ordered that all of it be given to us. The provincial lawyer got up and said, we don't want it all. The decision to not own all of the land was a political one, not an affordability one. Gordon Campbell, I'm told, had offered enough money to buy the whole thing. A decision was made that free enterprise ought to have a kick at the can too, and we shouldn't save it all. But we're not poor. Between Metro Vancouver, the feds, and Delta, we can raise the money to buy this little bit of the bog and allow these people to make their money on a piece of land on Scott Road or anywhere in Metro Vancouver that's underdeveloped or poorly developed. I'm not against development, but why wipe out something so beautiful, salmon stream, etc. Thank you for listening. If anyone wants to consult with me, I know I've been at this most of my adult life. Thanks, bye.
Thank you very much. Oh, I think there is a question. Director Reimer?
Yeah, it was just a quick question. You provided a lot of information on the content that one might consider at a public hearing, but the issue before us today is a process question about whether or not it should be Delta hearing it first or Metro Vancouver hearing it first.
Right.
So do you have an opinion on that?
I think that Burns Bog is of international renown and of international significance. Most of the money spent to save the park, and now this is going to, if this is done, it's going to wreck the park a little bit and take a lot. So yes, I think it should be a Metro Vancouver hearing, and I think so because it's widely loved by everyone. It's probably more appreciated outside of Delta than it is in Delta even.
Sorry, the question wasn't whether or not Metro Vancouver should hear it, but should we hear it first before the local municipality?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's my feeling.
Thank you very much. Director Steves?
Question, I'm trying to get in my mind the difference between this property and Burns Bog. I'm quite familiar with mined out peat bog because in Richmond, most of Richmond was mined out
Yes.
peat bog, and the cranberry fields where the bog was, and the Richmond Nature Park. But reading your submission, what your comment was here, is this mined out or is this pristine bog and Burns Bog is mined out?
Yeah, this is pristine peatland, and Burns Bog is mined out. It's pristine in every way, and it's unique, and it has these wonderful strips of things. It has some classic bog in it. It has some swamp forest. It has these little strips, just like zonations on a beach. And they're very, very different one from the other. So it's fabulously rich in a small area with many, many different kinds of habitat, with many kinds of species, and it's pristine. Most of it's pristine.
So the difference between this bog and Burns Bog is that this is more unique and more original than actually the main bog we've saved.
Yes, and it has habitats that are much rarer than in the broad bog. Bog is a wonderful habitat, but it's so hostile, it's so acid, it's so low in nutrients that almost nothing can grow there. This area has a neutral pH and much, much richer for many, many species. They're both wonderful habitats, but it's rarer in the area. It's more special, and I just love it. Those big trees, they're just fabulous.
Thank you very much. And there's no other questions, so thank you so much for coming out today.
Very good.
And our last speaker, Mr. Wershing. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing me. So the summary that I've submitted to everyone is the report that I prepared and presented to the Regional Planning and Agriculture Committee on July 5th. The figures and references are available online as it is not attached in today's agenda, so I thought I would submit it to you in this way. I'm basically hoping to draw some attention to it. My report is an analysis of the bioinventory study that was conducted by Robertson Environmental Services on behalf of the MK Delta Lands Group. After reading through the bioinventory, I was surprised with the results. There were no arguments against the presence of red and blue listed species. In fact, they witnessed many blue listed birds, amphibians, and invertebrates, while demonstrating that many other red and blue listed species are possibly existing within the property. The bioinventory acknowledges that 12 listed ecological plant communities could exist within their boundaries. However, they did not confirm this with any surveying, and they offered an explanation, and I quote, "Considerable documentation of the ecological uniqueness of Burns Bog and adjacent habitats establishes the ecological importance of the habitats within the study area," end quote. This statement gives rise to a whole new question. If the ecological importance of the study area is so well established, then why would we consider to develop it? Ground surveying for mammals was apparently also unnecessary. The presence of 2 red-listed mammals had been confirmed in the Burns Bog Ecosystem Review conducted in the year 2000. Highly suitable habitat for the same 2 mammals was also identified in the Robertson Bioinventory. A recent face-to-face meeting with Ian Robertson, one of the researchers hired by MK Lands, only further assured me of their presence in the subject property. After writing my report and attending the meeting with Robertson, I realized that I may have overlooked something. What if the presence of these red and blue listed species has no legal weight? What if there's not enough legal protection offered to stop a development? Perhaps my work was for naught. Instead, I can point out that the process taken by the Corporation of Delta is the opposite of what makes logical sense to me as a citizen. If only we had been given the opportunity to squash this in a public hearing before the possibility of losing conservation status was upon us. Mayor Jackson assured everyone at the regular council meeting on May 27th that sending this off to Metro Vancouver was in no way an approval and a very preliminary step in the process. But then I started wondering, how much opposition could we really muster against an area that would no longer be considered conservation by our own regional government? Then I read on the committee meeting agenda that Delta was requesting the RGS be amended for MK Lands. Why was my municipality requesting that we work from the top down instead of the bottom up? Why does it seem to be favoring the developer? I felt as though the concerns and letters, plus the 4,000 signatures, had been ignored on the petition. We were told at that same council meeting that we would have a chance to have our say if it came back to Delta, but there was not a single mention of a regional public hearing. I didn't even find out that there would be one until I read the report attached to today's agenda. And I'm a student with no job for the summer. Imagine the working folks, the people that didn't figure out this on their own, people that are not aware that they can have input in a regional hearing, if there comes to be one. I don't know the prices of advertising nowadays, but how far is Metro Vancouver going to go to make sure people know about this? Newspaper ads are likely. Radio ads, TV ads, bus stop ads, probably not so likely. But arguing against the process doesn't really help either, unless the directors today take issue with it and choose not to initiate it. I don't know if either argument I presented has any weight in the eyes of those that will vote today. There are almost certainly red and blue listed species residing in the property, but is that enough to hold back the project? Perhaps some people do not value these lands as an end in and of itself, like I and many others do. Perhaps those people could come to see the positive ecological services it provides to us, and would then give weight to other species in their moral judgment process, because they too provide us with direct and indirect benefits. In a world threatened by climate change, Metro Vancouver has created the regional growth strategy to keep the region accountable for sustainable development and protection of green zones. I hope it can protect what it is meant to protect in this and future amendment applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming forward and summarizing. And there are no questions. Thank you so much. All right, moving forward onto our agenda. We're now moving into the consent portion of our agenda. Would anybody like to remove anything out of consent? Please push your button. Director Martin.
E14.
Thank you. Director Steves.
1.6 and 1.7.
Anyone else? Seeing no other, would someone like to move the consent agenda? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We are going to go to E1.4. Can we get a mover for that first? Moved and seconded. Someone second it? Second, thanks. Thank you, Director Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only reason I wanted to pull this is because my staff asked that we acknowledge the appreciation and assistance of Metro staff Terry Hoff. They say the guidance and responsiveness greatly assisted with the regional context statement update, and they very much appreciate that. So Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for highlighting that. Seeing no other speakers, we'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item is item 1.6. Would someone like to move the motion to put it on the floor? Moved and seconded. Director Steves.
Well, thank you, Director or Chair. Basically, my concern that I expressed at the committee level was that this particular resolution should not even be here. That effectively the Delta application should go to the Delta Council first so we could hear the concerns of the Delta Council after they've heard from their own citizens. I'm reminded of the hearings we had only a few weeks ago when Port Metro Vancouver would not hold public hearings for coal shipments in the Fraser River. So we held a meeting here and had a quasi-hearing because we aren't the deciding body of it. But it filled these chambers, and we had a very large number of speakers opposed to the coal shipments on the Fraser River. If we were to hold such a public hearing here now, before Delta had their hearing, it's going to cost us $10,000 to put that hearing on. If you look at everybody gets a wage for the day coming in, if it's half a day, it's $10,000. If it was a whole day, maybe $20,000. We wouldn't even know what Delta was thinking. And as one of the speakers said earlier, if you do hold a hearing and Metro Vancouver says, yes, it's okay, how can they have a valid debate in Delta when the decision at the Metro Board has already been given. I think the onus is on Delta to hold the public hearings with their citizens, have the long or short hearing depending on the number of submissions that are made, and then make a recommendation after they've decided whether they want to go ahead with it or not, to come here and make a presentation at hearings in Metro Vancouver. So I would hope that rather than approving this, that we would simply refer this item back and request that Delta hold their own public hearing before it comes to the Metro Vancouver Board. And after discussion later, I would like to move that motion if there's any further discussion.
All right, thank you. Director Villeneuve.
Well, I totally support Director Steve's comments, and I appreciate the fact that Delta Council has gone through the process as they understood it to talk about initiating an amendment. And I think this discussion has brought some issues to light. And certainly with the information that I have, simply from the reports and from emails that I've received from the public, and not yet an application for the developer, although they're starting to lobby me, I've made it clear that I don't think that we should be in that position of looking at developers' applications and getting information from the public before Delta Council has had their own public hearing. And I think that from my understanding, is something that we can request through the process that we have. I think it's better, certainly for me, if I had to vote on this particular recommendation to support the initial application, I wouldn't be prepared to do it just because of my own personal background knowledge of Burns Bog, and certainly that's more than I would feel happy moving forward. So I support Director Steve's direction to send it to Delta to have a public hearing, and then this board is in the position to see the minutes from that public hearing and decide whether it's really worth initiating that process. Now, I know that puts councils in a position of feeling like they can't determine their own direction, but we've had this decision-making process and lots of public consultation on the regional context statements for over a 10-year period of time, putting our plans in place. So I think that's reasonable, and I just do not want to be in the position as a director of looking at applications from other cities around the region before they've gone through their own city councils and public hearings.
Thank you very much. Director Brody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to say that it's quite obvious that Delta staff and council have been working with Metro Vancouver staff, and trying to do exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So I'm fully with them on that. Yet I think that in an issue where you have an issue like this, which has significant local consequences, and then very, very significant, somewhat the same, somewhat different regional consequences, I think that we need to have a public hearing eventually, if it goes ahead, at both the local level and at the Metro Vancouver level. The question is, which do you hear first? Well, when it goes through the Delta process, I think things could change. The application could be tweaked in a very significant way. It may be reconsidered. Who knows exactly what's going to happen when it goes through their process. So I think that it's incumbent upon Delta to basically complete their process first and then come to Metro Vancouver if that's in order. Now, my suggestion, rather than simply referring it back, is because the initiation and giving out written notice, I don't see anything wrong with that. But I think that we should make it very clear that we don't plan to have a public hearing until Delta does. So at the appropriate time, I'm going to suggest an amendment that at the end of B, directing staff to provide written notice, et cetera, to everybody, provided that following such notice, no further steps such as a public hearing be conducted by Metro Vancouver until Delta conducts its public hearing on the application. So in due course, I'd like to make that amendment, propose that amendment.
Okay, and I said that I would go to, I think it was Director Martin on a referral first, so if we get through that, then we'll come to yours, but thank you for letting everybody know where you're planning to go. Director Hepner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think I agree with Director Brody's approach, because I cannot imagine that we would not want to know when there is a suggested change among our member municipalities to the regional land use designation. So I think it is incumbent on us to accept a Type 2 initiation process first, and then acknowledge that we would like to see Delta or any other municipality go through their own local government process before it comes back to us to engage. But to not engage in the very beginning, I think, would be a mistake, and something that we did not expect through the regional land use strategy. We fully expected to know when our neighboring municipalities were undertaking some change in the process. So I support the initiation, and then ultimately the Delta process, and then back to us.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Director Reimer?
Oh, well, I'm supportive of Director Brody's approach, and I think Director Hepner just covered off pretty much everything I might say about it. It does sound like Director Steves and Villeneuve also agree with the approach. It's really the question of what the definition in the motion. It says initiate the process, and I think some folks have read that as initiate a public hearing, which is not what it says. So it sounds like we could all be in agreement, which is fabulous. I would like to say, because I feel it's important to say it, that based on the information available right now on the content going forward in this application as outlined by the Delta staff, I would have a very hard time supporting it under the regional growth strategy terms. But the whole point of going through all these processes is to bring forward enough information to have a full consideration of it. So I will wish Delta well with what I'm sure will be a long public hearing, and perhaps we'll hear about it later.
Thank you. Vice Chair Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is obviously something that we'll have to deal with on an ongoing basis, and it's confused by the fact that we have a number of different applications before us to make some amendments. We obviously do not prefer what's transpiring in regards to Langley right now. We prefer to make sure that it works well for all of our partners around the region. Delta apparently has gone through a good process and has followed our instructions on how to go through this process. But I'm trying to reconcile what happened with Langley and in regards to what's happening with Delta. Langley, in its process, proceeded through to adopt and went through their public hearing, and then we said they're out of compliance. So in this instance, we're saying go through your process and then come to Metro for a public hearing. And now I'm hearing that no, you must go through your public hearing first. But if they do, then they'll be like Langley, where they're out of compliance with our RGS.
If I could jump in, that's only if Langley gave fourth reading, which is final adoption.
So my point is that we need to, and because we have a number of different public hearing processes around the region at our municipal councils, and this issue that was brought up by Director Stewart in terms of being excluded from part of that conversation, depending on how we can each conduct our specific public hearings, whether we go first, second, third, and finally adopt, or where we are allowed to participate here at the Metro Board when we're in the process of our own public hearings. That's where I lack the clarity and how we go about creating a structure that will work for all of us with our particular public hearing processes around the region, while still avoiding a situation where we find ourselves with Langley, but giving an opportunity for those specific items to be dealt with that should be dealt with at the local council without embroiling this board into all those local issues. And I don't see that clarity at this point in time, because we do things slightly different around the region at our municipal councils. And if staff have a concept, an idea on how to accomplish that, where we give some clarity of where Delta should go in terms of hearing from their public, and then we would then engage and give and pair up that process both at the local council and our process here at Metro, so the timing works well, so that we don't have to go and give notice that they're out of compliance. That would be helpful, I think, for the board to understand, and if staff have some concept of what that looks like before we vote on this, so that we can have consistency of application for all the applications that will come forward to us over a course of time.
Thank you very much.
Could I
Did you
get an
want-
answer
yeah.
from?
Sorry, I was chatting with her on something else.
I think Carol.
To
is-
clarify.
But I,
Go ahead.
Through the chair, I think that Director Louie is correct that the problem with our bylaw is that it does not provide clarity on process. And we were having this discussion with Delta staff as to Delta has gone and given 2 readings, and then they've sent it to us to go through our process to initiate, and then potentially to give 2 readings. But then that question about having Delta go through a public hearing before Metro Vancouver goes through a public hearing. It's not clearly articulated right now in the bylaw. I do believe that we do need to amend the bylaw to set out a process. My suggestion on that procedural question going forward for other applications is that it would be worthwhile to refer that back to Metro Vancouver staff and to our member municipalities planning staff to come up with a very clear process on how we deal with future applications. But at this point in time, it isn't. This is the best process that we have in terms of making a decision on whether the municipality holds their public hearing first or whether Metro Vancouver has the ability to go first. But I believe it is the board's discretion as to giving Delta the direction that you would like them to go through that process.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Ms. Mason, with that clarity, I think it is appropriate then to support the referral to have Delta have their public hearing first, and then us, after they've concluded theirs, that then we have ours.
Which is where Director
Which is
Brody
where
was
we are,
going.
yes.
Thanks. Alternate Director Ferguson.
Thank you. And I did want to say I pushed my button before Langley was mentioned a few times. I did want to mention that, discuss the fact that Mr. Harvey and his staff, our administrator from Delta, are here and or have made a submission. And of course, there's some delegation made some submissions as well today. And the discussion now has gone around the table as to process and why this happened and why something else didn't happen. And I certainly would support an amendment or a motion, obviously, to welcome Delta to go forward with the public hearing, which probably has been historically what they've been doing since they formed a government there years and years ago. And that's when I mentioned that our municipality Langley was mentioned, the fact that the confusion, the process, the roadmap, the direction, and don't need to educate those around the table that today is an example of how we've had much discussion about the initiation of a process as just beginning. And I would certainly, again, I would support this motion, but it gives an idea how confusing and how convoluted and confusing it can indeed be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Corrigan.
Well, I'm comfortable with the process that's suggested, and I just wanted to make clear that I think from a personal point of view, not speaking on behalf of the committee, but from a personal point of view, that that accepting the initiation of a process is key to ensuring fairness to the municipality that's an applicant, which is a critical element. I think that we have to both give the municipality an opportunity to make their case and to have our staff respond in relation to the issues that may have a regional impact during the course of the process, so that before we make a decision, we're fully informed. The other issue of saying there should be a local public hearing process means that the first forum is those people who have local concerns, who may want to look at the development and the impact it has on adjacent property owners, on the overall impact to the municipality. And after that's done, look at the regional impact and to discuss with our constituents around the region what the possible regional impacts are. And I think it will hone the public hearing that we have to deal with. If people feel they've had their own voice in their own community, then I think we're going to be able to focus on the issues that are most relevant to us as a region in regard to the particular proposal. we're not here, and I think we have to be clear, we're not here to do current planning. We're not here to discuss where a road should go or whether there should be 10 as opposed to 12 units in this pod. That's not the discussion that happens here. It is overall whether or not the urban containment area should be expanded in order to deal with this particular application. And I think we need to try as much as possible to confine our discussion to the area of our jurisdiction as we go through. So I'm comfortable in seeing these projects initiated, that there is nothing to indicate to the public that we've given any kind of approval, that in fact the process starts, but that we show to the rest of the region that the municipality has followed the appropriate process. They've notified their neighbors that they're looking to make a change in the regional growth strategy, that they're following a process within their own community that we should watch and be aware of. And then eventually, if they are satisfied after that process has been conducted, they want to proceed after they've heard from their own community, then it's time for us to look at the regional interests that may be affected. So I think that the proposal makes sense. If we weren't clear in the way the regional growth strategy was designed, I think that's affected some of the municipalities in the process they're going through. But I think that we do need to have the experience of going through some of these to be able to work out the kinks, to be able to know how it's going to most logically follow that process. So, while I think it's a difficult situation to offer any confusion to people about how it's going to work, I think this is a sensible way of making sure it does work to the advantage of both the region and the local governments.
Thank you very much. Director Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it would be naive to assume that there's going to be a whole flock of different speakers come out to each of these public hearings. I think it's going to be a repeat pretty well, that the people will get a second kick at the can, and they would welcome that. But having said that, I see the difficulty with the process as not being one of just stopping at the public hearing, but you've got to dispense with the third reading too. Otherwise, you pretty well disbar any members from Delta from participating at the regional level. And so that might be problematic. So I think that we should look at the issues of both not only the process and with respect to the order of the public hearings, but also taking up to the third reading, and which may evolve then into a iterative procedure where it goes back from the region back to the municipality and back to the region again. And that could conceivably set up, but that's the way the process is going to have to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And not to stick handle details at the board level, but you can keep a public hearing open over a time frame. You don't have to conclude it on one evening. So Delta could keep it open pending Metro Vancouver's public hearing process. So anyways, we'll let staff that is much smarter at this than I figure that out with everyone. So having said that, I said that I would go to Director Martin. I think it was someone wanted to put a referral. Was it you? Okay. Director Brody, you wanted to put an amendment on the floor. If you wouldn't mind just saying it again, I think we've got it captured, but just make sure we've got it.
Turn on my mic.
No. Oh, sorry, I got Harold's on.
There you go.
There you go.
So the proposed amendment would be at the end of B to say, provided the following such notice, no further steps such as a public hearing be conducted by Metro Vancouver until Delta conducts its public hearing on the application. So I would move that as an amendment.
Seconded. Are there any questions or comments on the amendment? Director, I'll let you speak first and then I'll go to... Yeah,
I just want to reflect, you said that possibly Delta may hold their public hearing open. I mean, while we do our public hearing.
Well, I'm just saying they could.
Yeah, but we've
had the comment from a couple people that as soon as the public hearing is closed, you can't receive new information unless you open up that sort of thing.
Yes, but we need Delta's opinion, and that's at the end of the public hearing, I would suggest.
Yeah,
so it may foreclose the possibility that Delta can be represented at our public hearing. I don't know, but I think we should get advice on that.
For sure. I agree totally. I'm just making sure Ralph's listening. He's in the back there. Yes, it was seconded. Director Jackson.
Thank you, and I think we have to have some clarity on that too, because we don't want to be left in a position in Delta of simply hanging a public hearing. If the intent of the amendment is to have Delta give a third reading after the public hearing and then come here, well, that's a different story. But the amendment simply reads a public hearing. It doesn't say third reading. It doesn't say an extension of a public hearing. So we have to know what it is that that we've got before us here. I think the wording of the amendment has to be clarified.
Ms. Mason?
If the board approves the initiation,
yes,
all the municipalities will provide comments, and then we can certainly capture that and get some advice on the appropriate wording for the report that will come back. I believe it's late September, early October, with all the comments. So I think we can address those questions that the directors have today at the next meeting of the Regional Planning and Agriculture Committee.
Okay, I appreciate that, but Delta has to know now. I mean, if we're going to public hearing with this issue, I mean, I've got to tell people, here's where the process is. This is the regional process, this is Delta's process. If we're just simply going now, as requested by the amendment, until Delta holds its public hearing, Delta has to be aware are we just going to hold a public hearing and then have a regional public hearing in conjunction with that? It's not helpful for the municipality, because I don't know what it is we're being asked to do again.
All we're suggesting here, do
you want Delta to hold
the amendment is, we're getting kind of convoluted here a little bit, and I understand you're trying to get clarity here.
Yes.
And I think, as Director Reimer pointed out, there's this whole thing about Metro Vancouver holding a public hearing and when it's going to hold it and all this sort of stuff.
Yes.
The original motion didn't say anything about a public hearing. It just said send this application out to our member municipalities to get their comment.
That's correct.
And so we're trying to clarify it here, because I think there was lots of comments around the table about who's going to hold the public hearing first, which has kind of muddied the water here. And so what Director Brody's amendment is that we still continue out, well, if the main motion passes, still continue out with that initiation of the public process or the local government process, but that we wouldn't hold our public hearing until the local government has done that. It didn't say anything about third reading. It's just that it allows local issues to come up first so that they're not coming to this table first. They might come there second. They might feel that they want more, that they didn't get heard well enough and they want to come here. Yeah. But that's all the motion saying.
I don't have a problem with that. I just want to know if Delta Council is going to hold a public hearing, do we then stop the process? I want to know what direction this motion or this amendment is making to Delta on the Delta side. I mean, the regional side, no problem. You can have it whenever you want or not have it, I don't know. But Delta has got to know what this amendment means. Do you want third reading of the bylaw?
That's not what the amendment says. The amendment doesn't say that. And nowhere in the process does it say that Delta can't go to a public hearing prior to Metro Vancouver getting the comments back from our local governments, right? You could go to a public hearing in your next council meeting if you wanted to, while we're still gathering public or comments from our local governments.
But
you might want to hear what those reports are first, but it's not stopping you from doing that.
I wonder, could we? I'm not sure if it's appropriate to have Mr. Harvey speak, but we need some direction as to what you want us to do here, and or Mr. Hildebrand or somebody on the legal aspect of it.
So
I'm not sure if you allow Mr. Harvey to speak.
To clarify, it's coming back to the Regional Planning and Agricultural Committee on October 4th with the comments from our local governments. Mm-hmm. If you wish to not hold your public hearing until after that date, so that you know what the regional comments are, that's your choice as the Corporation of Delta. If you want to hold it beforehand, you won't know what the comments are from around the region. So that's the process.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure whether you'd allow this. Would you allow Mr. Harvey just to clarify?
No, I don't. Okay. With all due respect to Mr. Harvey, I don't think that's appropriate. This is a Metro Vancouver. I'm not.
Well, we're going to have a legal opinion on it, because you're saying have a public hearing, don't give it third reading, hang it up. I mean, you either want a third reading of the bylaw or you want a public hearing.
We haven't asked for either.
First.
We're trying to initiate a process to go out to ask our local governments for comments
Yes.
on an application that Delta has made. Not a developer, by the way, Delta.
No, I know.
Okay, so that's the first part. The clarification that Director Brody, and I'll go to him to ensure this, is that Metro Vancouver doesn't go to that step of holding a public hearing until Delta has held their public hearing. That's all we're talking about.
Third reading?
No, that's not in the motion.
Well, how can you hold a public hearing of this size and scope and not ask for a third reading?
Director Brody.
I certainly didn't want to split hairs like that when I made my motion. When I said conduct its public hearing, I was assuming that would move to conclusion and decision. But I understand that there is imprecision here. And so either I or someone I suggest, we would simply add on the wording, so it's conduct until Delta conducts its public hearing on the application and